You ever work somewhere so long, you start noticing things that shouldn't be there? I'm Alex. Been the night janitor at St. Mary's Memorial for 8 years now. 8 years of bleach stains on my uniform. 8 years of echoing footsteps in empty hallways. 8 years of pretending not to hear the whispering when I'm alone in the cardiac wing at 2 a.m. By now, I know every hallway like the back of my hand. Which bulbs flicker? The fourth one in the east corridor always dies first. Which floorboards creak? 3 steps from the nurse's station sounds like a dying man's cough. Even which wheelchairs roll by themselves when no one's around. But the basement? That's different. The basement has its own rules. Not the kind you'll find in any employee handbook. No yellow caution signs or OSHA warnings for what lives down there. These rules get passed down janitor to janitor, whispered over lukewarm coffee in the break room when no supervisors are around. Old man Pritchard, the guy who trained me, showed me the ropes back in 2016. First day, he didn't teach me how to buff floors or unclog toilets. Instead, he gripped my shoulders so tight it hurt and said, "Listen, kid, you want to last here? You respect these 5 things about the basement." Then he gave me the list. Never answer when the pipes start humming in a voice that isn't metal. Never look too long at the reflection in the autopsy room glass, especially when you know you're alone. If your mop water turns red, walk away. Don't ask why. Just go. When the elevator stops on B2 without being called, take the stairs. Even if it's 10 flights. And whatever you do, never, ever, try to open the red door at the end of the service corridor. At the time I laughed it off. Thought it was just some hazing ritual for the new guy. I stopped laughing when Pritchard disappeared 2 weeks later. They found his keys, found his thermos, even found his glasses resting neatly on the morgue slab like he'd just set them down. But Pritchard? Gone. Like he'd never existed at all. The official report said early retirement. Funny though, no one ever saw him collect his pension. I should have quit then. But rent doesn't pay itself, and honestly, after a while, the weird stuff becomes just part of the job. You learn to ignore the shadow that ducks into rooms when you turn corners. You stop jumping at the sound of your name being called from empty operating theaters. At least until the night you break one of the rules. That's when they really start noticing you back. I took this job because it paid decent and hospitals never close. I figured it would be a steady gig, something to help me get by while I figured out my next move. I was fresh out of college, drowning in student loans, and the thought of working a 9 to 5 in some stuffy office made my skin crawl. So, when I saw the ad for a night janitor at St. Mary's Memorial, I jumped at the chance. Heck, I got used to mopping blood, cleaning toilets, and even the occasional midnight footsteps echoing through empty wings. You learn to tune out the sounds of a hospital at night, the beeping machines, the distant murmurs of nurses, the soft rustle of sheets. It becomes a rhythm, a lullaby of sorts, lulling you into a false sense of security. But the basement? That's a different story. Even the nurses avoid it if they can. I get it. It's old, damp, and smells like bleach and something else. Something that lingers in the air, heavy and suffocating, like meat left out too long. The fluorescent lights flicker, casting eerie shadows that dance along the walls, and the air feels thick, almost electric. You can't help but feel like you're being watched, like the walls themselves are alive, breathing in sync with the whispers that seem to echo from the depths. I remember my first week on the job, pushing my mop down the long, sterile corridors, the smell of antiseptic clinging to my clothes. I'd hear the occasional scuffle, a soft thud, or a whisper that sent chills racing down my spine. I brushed it off as my imagination, a side effect of working the graveyard shift. But then I noticed the way the nurses would glance at each other, their eyes wide with unspoken fear whenever the basement was mentioned. "Stay away from there, Alex." One of them warned me, her voice low and serious. "You don't want to know what's down there." I laughed it off, thinking it was just hospital folklore, a way to scare the new guy. But deep down, I felt a knot of unease settle in my stomach. I'd heard the stories about the patients who never left, about the strange occurrences that happened in the dead of night. But I was a janitor, not a ghost hunter. I had a job to do, and I wasn't about to let a few ghost stories scare me away. But as the nights wore on, I found myself drawn to the basement, the very place I was warned to avoid. There was something about it that called to me, a curiosity that I couldn't shake. Little did I know, that curiosity would lead me down a path I could never have imagined. The first week on the job, old man Pritchard, the guy who trained me, sat me down in the break room, his face serious, eyes shadowed by years of night shifts. He leaned in close, as if sharing a secret that could save my life. "Listen, kid," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "There are 5 things you need to know about the basement." I chuckled, thinking he was just trying to scare the new guy. But the way he looked at me, the urgency in his tone, made me sit up straight. "First," he said, holding up a finger, "never respond to whispers, even if they call your name." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Trust me, it's not who you think it is." I nodded, trying to suppress a grin. Whispers? In a hospital? It sounded like something out of a bad horror movie. "Second," he continued, "never look into the mirrors. They don't always show you what you think you see." He glanced at the small mirror above the sink, as if it might spring to life at any moment. "You might see something or someone who shouldn't be there." I raised an eyebrow, but Pritchard's expression remained grave. "Third," he said, "never work past 3 a.m. That's when something else takes over. You'll feel it in the air, like a storm brewing. Just don't be there when it hits." I laughed again, but this time it felt forced. The thought of something lurking in the shadows sent a shiver down my spine. "Fourth," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "if the lights flicker, get out. It's checking if you're alone." He leaned back, crossing his arms, as if satisfied with the fear he'd instilled. "And finally," he said, his eyes narrowing, "don't touch the red door at the end of the service corridor. It's not on any blueprint for a reason." I couldn't help but scoff. "A red door? Seriously?" Pritchard's gaze hardened. "You think I'm joking? I've seen things, kid. Things that would make your skin crawl. Just remember these rules." I laughed it off, thinking it was just some old man's way of hazing the new guy. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to notice things. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls, calling my name in voices I didn't recognize. The mirrors in the break room seemed to shimmer with something just out of sight. And then there were the flickering lights. They'd dance above me, casting shadows that felt alive, as if they were trying to communicate. I brushed it all aside, convinced it was just my imagination. But deep down, I felt a gnawing unease. I should have listened to Pritchard. I should have taken his warning seriously. But curiosity has a way of leading you down dark paths, and I was about to find out just how dangerous it could be. I was cleaning the morgue hallway late one night, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting a sterile glow on the cold tiles. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic, and the silence was almost deafening, broken only by the soft swish of my mop against the floor. I had just finished scrubbing the last of the bloodstains from an unfortunate accident earlier that week when I heard it. A whisper, clear as day. "Alex." I froze, my heart racing. The voice was soft, almost melodic, but it sent a chill down my spine. I spun around, expecting to see one of the nurses or maybe even Pritchard, but there was nothing. Just the empty hallway stretching out behind me, lined with cold metal doors. Pritchard's warning rang in my head. Never respond to whispers. But instincts are a bitch. They kick in when you least expect it. I muttered, "Hello." My voice echoed back at me, swallowed by the oppressive silence. For a moment, I stood there, straining to hear anything else. The whisper had vanished, leaving only the sound of my own breathing. Then, bang, every locker in the morgue slammed shut at once. The sound reverberated through the hallway, a cacophony of metal that made my skin crawl. That's when I saw it. A shadow, tall and elongated, standing at the far end of the hallway. Its proportions were all wrong. Legs too long, arms too thin, as if it had been stretched beyond its limits. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I felt a primal instinct kick in, a fight or flight response that screamed at me to run. I didn't hesitate. I turned on my heel and bolted down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I could feel the weight of that shadow pressing down on me, urging me to stop, to turn around, but I pushed myself harder, my feet pounding against the tiles. I burst through the double doors leading to the main corridor, gasping for breath. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, and I stumbled into the break room, slamming the door behind me. I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath, my mind racing. The next day, I reviewed the security tapes, hoping to find some explanation for what I had seen. But the footage showed nothing, just me, mopping the floor, oblivious to the horrors lurking in the shadows. But I know what I saw. I felt it. And deep down, I knew I had broken one of Pritchard's rules. The basement was alive, and it was watching me. After my encounter in the morgue, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, and the whispers grew louder, echoing in my mind. I needed to talk to someone, to find out if I was losing my grip on reality. That's when I decided to approach Nurse Reyes. She had been working at St. Mary's for over 20 years, a veteran of the night shift. I often saw her moving through the halls, her expression a mix of exhaustion and determination. She was one of the few nurses who didn't flinch when I mentioned the basement, and I hoped she could shed some light on the darkness that had begun to envelop me. One night, I found her in the break room, sipping coffee and staring blankly at the wall. I hesitated before approaching her, but the weight of my experience pushed me forward. "Nurse Reyes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something?" She turned to me, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You saw it, didn't you?" I blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" She didn't laugh or dismiss my fears. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small street Christopher medal, handing it to me with a steady hand. "Take this. It's for protection." I stared at the medal, the image of the saint etched into the metal. "Why do you think I need it? They built this place on old ground." "Bad ground," she said, her voice low and serious. "Some patients, they don't leave." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" Reyes leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You hear the stories, right? About the patients who died here? They say their spirits linger, trapped between this world and the next. And the basement? That's where it's strongest." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling in my gut. "What about the red door?" I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought I saw fear flicker in her eyes. "You stay away from that. That's not a door. That's an invitation." "An invitation?" The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What happens if you open it?" Reyes shook her head, her expression grave. "No one knows. But those who have tried, they never come back the same. If they come back at all." I nodded, the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I was in over my head, and the basement was a place I had no business exploring. But the curiosity still gnawed at me, a dark whisper urging me to uncover the truth. Last winter, the pipes burst in the hospital, flooding the whole damn basement. It was a chaotic night, and my boss, in a panic, ordered me to check the valve past 3 a.m. I should have refused. I should have remembered Pritchard's warnings, but the urgency in my boss's voice drowned out the fear gnawing at my gut. As I descended the stairs to the basement, the air grew colder, a biting chill that seeped into my bones. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. My flashlight died halfway down, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, but of course, there was no signal. Just me, the echo of my footsteps, and the oppressive silence that wrapped around me like a shroud. Then, the lights flickered again, off, then on. I squinted into the dimness, and that's when I saw them. Outlines in the dark, dozens of them, standing in the corners, their shoulders hunched, heads tilted at unnatural angles. They were watching me. I could feel their eyes boring into my soul, 1,000 silent screams echoing in the void. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, my heart racing. I remembered Reyes's warning about the red door, the one that wasn't on any blueprint. But there it was, wide open at the end of the hallway, beckoning me with an eerie glow. Inside, no room, just a tunnel that seemed to stretch into infinity. And something was crawling out of it, something that defied description, a writhing mass of shadows and whispers. I didn't think. I ran. I bolted down the hallway, the whispers growing louder, a cacophony of voices calling my name, taunting me. I could feel the cold breath of the shadows on my neck, urging me to stop, to turn around. But I pushed myself harder, my feet pounding against the slick floor, desperate to escape the nightmare that had come to life around me. I burst through the double doors leading to the main corridor, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I collapsed in the parking lot, the cold air hitting me like a wave. When they found me, I was delirious, feverish, my body shaking uncontrollably. They said I hallucinated from hypothermia, that I had imagined the shadows and the whispers. But I know what I saw. I know the basement has rules for a reason. Break them, they'll break you right back. And as I lay there, shivering and lost, I realized I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The basement was alive, and it was hungry. I still work here, still clean the halls, the bathrooms, even the damn morgue. The routine is familiar, almost comforting, but the shadows linger in the corners of my mind, a constant reminder of what I've seen. I've learned to navigate the hospital with a practiced ease, but there's one place I won't go, the basement. Not after 3 a.m., not if the whispers start, not ever. The other janitors joke about me, calling me a coward for avoiding the basement. They don't know what I know. They haven't felt the cold grip of fear that wraps around your heart when you realize you're not alone. I've seen the way the lights flicker, the way the shadows move just out of sight. I've heard the whispers calling my name, and I refuse to let them draw me back into that darkness. But the hospital is a living entity, and it has a way of reminding you of your fears. Just last week, I was mopping the floor near the service corridor when I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. The red door. It was ajar, just a crack, and a sliver of light spilled out into the hallway. My heart raced as I approached, the familiar knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door. The light was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, damp air of the basement. It flickered, almost as if it were breathing, pulsing with a life of its own. I could feel the whispers rising in my mind, urging me to step closer, to push the door open and see what lay beyond. But I remembered Reyes's warning, Pritchard's rules. This wasn't just a door. It was an invitation, a temptation to cross a threshold I had no business crossing. I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to run. But curiosity is a powerful force, and I felt it tugging at me, pulling me toward the light. What could be waiting for me on the other side? Answers? Freedom? Or something far worse? I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I knew that whatever lay behind that door was not meant for me. The basement had its own rules, and I had already broken too many. But as I continued my shift, the image of that door lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that the basement was still watching, waiting for me to slip up again. And deep down, I knew that one day, I might not be able to resist the call of the red door.